Welcome to the Your Money Personal Finance Podcast. I'm David Pratt, along with the president of Everything Financial, Peter Cishecki. Peter, on Season 2, Episode 15, what we're going to talk about here are the 10 key questions on TFSAs, or as we like to call it, the new RRSP season.
That's
what
right.
Is a TFSA?
TFSA, a TFSA. We don't have enough acronyms in this business, right? A TFSA, a tax-free savings account. That is what TFSA stands for. It's not the border guards when you go on a plane searching you and checking body cavities. That's the TSA in the States anyways. No, a tax-free savings account. You see the signs everywhere, walk into any major financial institution, or as we say with a four-letter word that ends in K, a bank. You thought I was going, hey, we don't have to edit this. Yes. We don't, the children are not watching. We're okay. So children are now going to their mothers and fathers who are watching this. Mommy, what does he mean by a four-letter word ending in K? That's the one I heard you and Daddy use the other day. So there you go.
I'm just reaching for the mute button there, okay?
No, there's no mute button. We own our own podcast, Dave. We don't need to mute.
No. Damn right. Okay, so when it comes to contributing, okay, because let's get into this, okay? Because that's what it's all about, contributing. What are the limits here to all of this?
Well, the limits over the years, Dave, have changed so many times I can't count. The current limit in a TFSA, the contribution limit for when we're recording this, 2022, is $6,000. Same as the contribution was in 2021, $6,000. Current government in Canada, for some reason, likes to keep this limit low. Previous regime with Harper had this limit up in the $10,000 area at one point. But the more important thing is, what is your lifetime contribution limit? And that right now, your lifetime contribution limit is $81,500. Let's assume you've never, ever deposited to a TFSA. Then it's $81,500. But that limit can be affected by other factors and could actually, theoretically, it could be higher than $81,500. There is a way.
Okay, see, the thing is, when we started getting into all this, the first question that came to my mind is, okay, what are the differences here, between, say, a TFSA, which is what we're talking about right now, and an RRSP?
Yeah, there's big differences, and a lot of people don't realize it. But with an RRSP, it's really a tax deferral. You're not getting it. People think it's a tax refund and whatnot. It's not. With an RRSP, you're contributing to an RRSP and you're getting to defer your taxes. So I'll explain what that means and then I can tell you what the difference is. So let's say you're in a 48% tax bracket and you buy $10,000 in an RRSP. And then you're going to get, if you're still in a 48% tax bracket by contributing $10,000, that's a whole other episode I think we did earlier this season, you're going to get a 48% refund or $4,800. But it's not like you get that money forever. If you cash in the RRSP down the road and you're still in a 48% tax bracket, that's not good financial planning, but also it means you're going to have to give back that same $4,800. The idea with an RRSP is defer the taxes to the later date when you cash in the RRSP and say contribute in a 48% tax bracket and cash them in a 20% tax bracket. That's good financial planning for sure. With a TFSA, the difference is you're deflecting tax. So that there's a hockey terminology, Dave, deflection. We always go to those. And with a TFSA, you've already paid tax on the money you contributed to the TFSA. It came from your taxable income. Tax is already paid. The thing with the TFSA is, what are you going to do with the growth? So the growth, if done properly, and one of our questions later will explain the only reason you pretty well can't do this, but with a TFSA, you're deflecting the tax to later. So all the growth, if done right, you're not going to pay tax on any of that growth. And that could be substantial. So let's just back up one step here about your contribution limit. If you take money out of the TFSA, So you put in 30, it's worth 40. You take out that $10,000, you get to put that money back in later. And we'll get into that in a little more detail. So that would get anything you withdraw gets added to your contribution limit. So there's the kind of nuts and bolts, major differences.
What I can get from what you're saying is that there is a real benefit here. Okay. But yet there are a lot of people who think that TFSAs are just flat out not worth it.
Yeah.
Is that an argument worth making?
Yeah. Again, the 4-letter word that ends in K. That's because for years, personally, and this is not a political statement, or I know that's hard to believe for me.
Yes.
This is just, I'm going to play devil's advocate and say the government had good intentions way back when, and they just misnamed a TFSA. Because when you say tax-free savings account, those institutions that end in K, that's what we're going to call them from now on, because I kind of feel the same way sometimes. But they call them a tax-free savings account, and what they really did, and it's been going on now forever, is all the advertising banners when you walk into those institutions say, come get your TFSA, earn 0.15% interest, 0.25. Why would you even bother putting your money in a savings investment account that's going to get like 0.15% interest? I don't even care if you're freaking in the 53.5% tax bracket. You don't even save enough tax to go for dollar drink days at the Golden Arches, for crying out loud. Like, you're saving virtually nothing. So if you want to save money with a TFSA, treat it like an RRSP in the sense that, in most cases anyways, a longer term investment, and that's up to your direction. And if you're investing the portfolio manager way instead of the MF way that we talk about all this time, people, that does not mean anything to do with your parent, by the way, when I said MF. I'm talking about mutual funds. Gosh, people who watch this podcast are so rude sometimes. But don't sit there and, invest in something that's useless. Like, talk to your portfolio manager, talk to your registered financial planner, make the TFSA for the most part, and I'll give the exception in a minute, but make it a long-term investment where you can choose something long-term that's going to do better and make that tax savings worthwhile, kind of like your RSP, right? Get good, significant tax savings out of that TFSA down the road. Not, imagine 0.15% on your $81,500 of contribution. Wow, I saved 6 cents this year. That's great. Just a waste of time.
Yeah, but it really gets us to the much more important question here, because you've just made the case here. So how do you turn that TFSA into an RRSP? Because that to me would make the most sense.
Well, we talked about in previous episodes, Dave, and I know I've spent my lifetime educating you, or just the last 4 years of us together seems like a lifetime sometimes. Probably for you too.
I get it.
Probably for you too. Yes. We've had many dinners out where we, that caused this to be a lifetime. So here's the thing. We talk about buying an RRSP in previous episodes, and we talked about just because you can buy an RRSP doesn't necessarily mean you should buy an RRSP. In other words, using that example we used a few minutes ago, if you're in a 48% tax bracket and you put too much money into your RRSP, maybe that drops you down to like a 26% or a 30% tax bracket, or even a 42% tax bracket. Let's just say, even though it doesn't really exist, let's just say 48%, you put too much into an RRSP and you're in a 38% tax bracket. And I've seen it happen. Well, that means you're getting 10% less back in your savings. Like, you're letting the government off the hook of a 10% smaller refund on all your deposits. So instead, maybe this strategy will work into your financial planning, goals. You could put, if you're not sure yet what to do for an RRSP for the coming season, you think you might need some. But hey, coming out of the pandemic, income's been off and on, bonuses have been off and on, you're not really sure. Put your money into a TFSA, but invest it, at your direction, have the portfolio manager invest it like your RRSP. So maybe it's in the same investments that are long-term thinking investments, for good accumulation. Let's say that's what you're thinking of. But then you get to January or February next year, and rather get sucked into that RRSP season. When my staff hears me say that, they're going to make me put money in the RRSP swear jar, because I told them I never want to hear you say that word after the word RRSP. But let's just say the RRSP deadline time. And all of a sudden you're doing your planning and you realize, you know what? I need a little bit more in that RRSP than maybe I've deposited monthly through my advisor or in my plan or at work or whatever the case may be. And I got to top it up. Well, turn that money, like transfer it over from your TFSA to your RRSP. So let's use an example. You had $30,000 in your TFSA. Say, let's just use simple math, people. We're not saying you're going to get this. We're not promising anything, just math here today in education. And it earned 10%. And so you made $3,000. Remember now, Dave, the $3,000 is tax free. So you move $3,000 into your RRSP because you need that little extra bump, and you're in a 48% tax bracket. So your $3,000 tax free put into your RRSP from your TFSA now is going to earn you close to an additional $1,500 in tax savings with a refund. Or savings. I mean, if you didn't pay enough tax, then it's just savings. If you paid enough tax, then you're going to get that money back. But regardless, you're using tax-free growth to produce further tax savings growth. So you could turn that $3,000 into about $4,400 or $4,900 by starting out with the TFSA and then moving to the RSP. It's a great strategy that can work many times. I've seen lots of people use it, and it's more for getting you to invest in the TFSA long-term and not putting too much money right off the bat into the RSP that you do a disservice to yourself tax-wise. It gives you, Dave, it gives you more flexibility. Well, I'm putting money away still, but I'm not sure if I need the RSP yet, but at least I'm making money, long-term and making growth. So it gives you choice, because remember, you can pull out of the TFSA. Once you put that money into the RSP, you generally don't want to pull it out till the later years, till you're in a low tax bracket. Because what if job things didn't go your way and you got laid off, or there was a cutback or something, and all of a sudden you needed an emergency fund? Oh, you can pull some money out of that TFSA without the tax consequences. So it just gives you a bit more choice.
Now, for that individual that is trying to, pay off the mortgage, and there's a lot of that out there right now. So let's get into this here. Now, how can a TFSA benefit your mortgage? Boy, that to me, because you and I know a lot of people that are trying to get that mortgage off the books.
Yeah.
How does this help?
Well, let's use an example, and again, general example, and this is close to something we did recently for someone. Say you're putting $2,500 away for your mortgage, and it's a 30-year mortgage. Let's just say, you're fairly new, right? You're putting in the mortgage, and you go, well, geez, if I can afford an extra $500 a month, and the $500 puts you from, no, actually, let's change this. I got my numbers here on the side. So 25-year mortgage, $2,500 a month. You go, oh, if I put $500 more away, I'm on a 20-year mortgage. That seems like a reason, and you can afford it, let's say, right, Dave? So that seems like a reasonable thing to do. Geez, I just spent $500, knocked, 5 more years off my mortgage. Oh, but here's another way to look at it. And I've got the stats to back this up. We've done lots of scenarios for this. What if instead of going that way, you go the other way? So you take your $2,500 and you lower it to $2,000 and you go, oh, now I have a 30-year mortgage. Well, that's not good. I'm trying to pay my mortgage off quicker. But remember, the total you're spending is $3,000. Now you take that $1,000, because you went from 25 to 2. You take that extra $1,000 and you put it all into a TFSA. And we have to use an assumption here. We got to have some assumptions. Let's just say you make 5% on your TFSA tax-free. By taking that lump sum of money in 5 years, and every 5 years you dump that down on your mortgage, you'll knock about 3-4 more years off that mortgage. Like, it's considerable, the amount so you won't be at, and when I say 3-4 more years, I mean not the 20 years, you'll be down to like 17 years or somewhere around there. Like, it makes and we actually do, I'm just using examples, people, so oh, how did we do that? And people go to their computers and try and figure it out. We have actually a computer program that runs these scenarios for people. So we can choose really any payment you want based on that 5% assumption and figure out what the difference is in mortgage savings. And it is significant. And I mean, we not afraid to admit it. Vitri Trong, who's the associate advisor at Everything Financial, we had on talking about mortgages before. We came up with this kind of by accident when just trying to playing around with a computer program we built, trying to figure all this stuff out. And suddenly we realized, wait a minute, now that the TFSA limits are getting, the contribution limits are getting, way up there, there's some meat to them. Like before when it was 20 grand, like, really tax savings on 20 grand, what's that going to get you? Now we're talking 81.5 in contributions, and you put that with your spouse, you're at, 163,000. That's some considerable deposits over the years to a TFSA.
Yeah.
But you could literally, if the interest environment works out to your benefit, the rate of return environment works out to your benefit, it's worth the discussion and looking at actually lowering or increasing your amortization to lower your monthly payment, to put the money into a TFSA to actually decrease your amortization. It's something people don't look at. And why don't they look at it? Because they walk into the institution that ends in K and they think they're only going to get 0.15% on their TFSA. That's a rhyme. Anyways, that happens. I get more calls about that than anything. Like I get people saying to me, why would you ever put money into a TFSA to earn 0.1% or a tenth of a percent and stuff like that? I said, and I just say, why would you put into a TFSA that only earns you a tenth of a percent or 0.15 of a percent? Because you know why? Because people don't know there's an alternative. There's a different way to look at it because no one is telling them at those institutions. Because remember, the first person you meet when you go to those institutions are tellers, not listeners. So they don't really know your situation.
Okay, here's the joker in the deck, all right? The growth of that TFSA, which is what we're talking about, all right? Can that be taxable? I mean, can you get bit on the other side of this thing?
Oh, yeah, and it's happened. And there's case law to prove it. I mean, TFSAs are a personal savings account. They're a personal device. They're not a company device. You can't have a company-owned TFSA. Doesn't exist. So don't use your TFSA as a job, as a money-making day-to-day scheme, and you'll be fine. So where am I going with this? Day trading. The person who does day trading for a limit and does it in their TFSA, there's been people who have done it, and they've been caught, and lawyers have tried to fight the government because we know how well that works. Apparently, fighting the government only works if you're already in government. And then you can break as many laws as you want. At least that's the way it seems. Got political. Someone's going to be offended. Oh, well, don't watch the podcast if you're offended easily. And so, there's been cases used as a day trading account. That's just one example. There are a few others. You can Google them, but that's a common one. If it's a job account, again, it's a personal savings device, not a company savings device. You can get stung. So imagine if you were day trading and turned your $50,000, $60,000 of stock into $500,000 of stock virtually, it seemed almost overnight. You don't think that's going to raise a red flag? And they're maybe just going to look into how did you make that kind of money? And easy to track day trading. So you can get stung. Yeah. But, there's a few other minor ones, but that's kind of the biggest one right there. Also, nowadays too, there's a lot of Americans work in Canada and they get, work visas, etc., but they're still Americans. And working in Canada with their work visas, they can buy RRSPs against their income. Not a TFSA though. It's taxable in the States. So there's no point. So I had a client recently who was moving to the States permanently, married, moving to the States. So he has to liquidate his TFSA. Luckily, he made good money in it, but he has to cash it in and take the value at that point. Because if he makes a bunch more money now, it would all end up taxable in the States anyways, and he's not allowed to hold it. So there is So people do move to other countries, then you can't hold the TFSA anymore and you have to liquidate it. But what you liquidate it for at that time is still tax free. It's just the growth beyond that that's in a normal investment account, and you're going to have to pay tax on it.
With all the options that you've just thrown out there, and there's multiple ones here, it leads to the question of, you know what, maybe I should have more than just the one TFSA that I can play with back and forth so that I've got the options as opposed to the feds knocking on my door.
Exactly. And that option I was kind of making fun of when I talk about those institutions
Yeah.
later, but because you don't have to go to them to do it. But say you need some money for emergency money for your family, money you just don't want to tie up, money you want in short-term savings. You can have more than one TFSA, Dave. You can have a TFSA for the short-term savings and just do pick an interest type savings account, but don't go to those institutions where you're making 0.1 or 0.15. There's institutions out there, independent ones that'll pay you 0.75% or 1% interest. That makes a lot more sense. But that's your short-term emergency fund, maybe family vacation fund, TFSA.
Sure.
And the rest of your money for the long term at the more aggressive, if you will, or volatile TFSA, more along the lines of your, like I said, your RRSPs. Or here's another one. Say you're not near your limit and you have a teenager who's working or something. They're not old enough to buy a TFSA, and there's no way they would buy RSPs, even if they were old enough, because they're just making basic teenager type wages. And I mean, but you got to be over a certain age anyways. But why not set up a separate TFSA for your kids, but it's under your name? As again, if you have lots of contribution room, and at least there your kids are making a realistic rate of interest versus sitting their money in a bank. And you know what? You start to teach your kids about investing at a young age, and that's not ever a bad thing to get them on the right path of saying, hey, look, you can take this much money out of your paycheck at the Golden Arches or the coffee shop or whatever they're working. And they put it back in our day, Dave, it was a paper route, but I don't even think those exist anymore. But you can put the money away. You can put the money away for savings under your parents' name. And again, and I have a lot of parents who do that because, like I said, they've still got tons of room. And if it helps their kids get on the right path for the first 3 or 4 years and see what significant savings is all about, till those children turn, in BC 19, even though contract age is 18, they're 19 before they can open a TFSA. And by the way, when they turn 19, because the federal government rule is 18, but in BC, that's their second year of contribution. So they can do 2 years at once they turn 19. They just can't open the contract till they're 19.
Okay. Now, if you withdraw some of the money, because we've been talking about this, I mean, the whole idea of it is to put it in there and then take it back out.
Absolutely.
Is there a time frame on this? I mean, when can you put it back and not get bit?
Yeah, we talked about that earlier when I said I'd allude to this later. You have to wait till the calendar turns over. So if you take money out now and you're maximized, say you've put in your full 81,500 of contribution, just to keep things simple at the moment, and you take that money out now, you can't put it in until the calendar turns over to January 1st. If you're not maximized, you can put in whatever contribution room you have, but that extra contribution from taking out that $10,000 or whatever the case may be, that part of your contribution room doesn't come back into play until the next year. So you are delayed. So this is a reason for people to sit with their registered financial planner, say in November, and look at their TFSA limits, see what kind of growth is there, and decide, hey, am I going to need money for something for the end of the year or the first quarter or so of next year? Geez, I can pull that money now out of the growth of my TFSA tax-free, but I'm kind of only delayed if I don't need it to put it back in until, if that's November, till January. So you're not really putting handcuffs on yourself for contribution. You only have a couple months to wait. So even if you're not maximized in your contributions, I would review your TFSA every November just to see what's there for the end of the year and do I need some tax-free money? Never hurts to look.
Here's the thing. I mean, after everything you've just said here, the more and more it's coming to me that I'm going, wow, the clients that you're dealing with, how many of them just don't have a plan? Do you know what I mean?
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
you've laid
tons.
all this stuff down, but if you don't have a plan, you know, can you just spin yourself around in circles and wind up at the wrong end of this equation?
Yeah, because when you're retiring, Dave, you've got
Yeah,
CPP, old age security, your RSPs turned into a RIF. We've talked about that before. Maybe a pension
yeah.
from work, etc. Well, all that's taxable. You got to pay tax on all that. Now, there's some planning you can do to limit that tax quite a bit, but again, still taxable. So why not look at the TFSA as a good alternative to something that you can do to add on tax-free income to your retirement? Save yourself a bunch of tax money in your income at retirement. That's a huge benefit.
Yeah.
The more you can have that's tax-free, the less pressure on the rest of your investments. I mean, because you don't, if you have $1,000 tax-free at retirement, you only need to take out $1,000. But if it's in an RSP or a RIF at that point and you need $1,000, you might have to take 1,400 or 1,350 to net $1,000. So it's nice if the $1,000 can actually be $1,000. And there's where the TFSAs can come in handy.
Here's the final thing I want to throw by you now, and because as you know, I'm not an accountant. Okay, I'm not an accountant. I have people that do that. The lady in my life does it for me. I'm not an accountant. Okay, and I occasionally will lose track of things and numbers. And okay, if you're like me and you lose track of your contributions, how the hell do you verify them? I mean, there's got to be a system here. Help me.
There's the
Help
CRA My Account you can log into. But when you log into that, you're going to notice real quick, your contributions are always a year out of date. If you log in now, you're not going to have last year's contributions in there. You got to watch that, because I tell you what, Dave, you do not want to over contribute to your TFSA. I mean, you'll be treated like a protesting truck driver in downtown Ottawa by the government.
Yeah.
So, and that's not good, people, by the way, in case you forget what happened a few months ago or last month. So try and keep record. Your institution, your planning team you use will keep track of your contributions. So one of the first things I recommend people do when they come to see us, we get authorization to get their My Account section of CRA uploaded, and we go in and find out their contribution room and then keep a record of it for them from there on going forward. Because it is, you put here, you put money there, did I put that in RSP? Did I put that in a TFSA? Did I move this money over? Oh, wait a minute. I took some money out. Now I'm putting money back in. You're right. It can get confusing to keep track of this stuff all the way along. So take the help of your registered financial planner and go to the My Account section of CRA, get it brought up to date, and then keep an accurate record. Because if you are not sure, err on the side of caution, because the penalties are just not worth it to over contribute. I mean, don't be afraid of using the vehicle, the TFSA, but make sure you stay on the right side of the contribution room for sure. So just one quick story here, Dave, on TFSAs and over contribution. And this is a true story. This is a case that actually happened, and I've seen it happen more than once, where a person went into the My Account section of CRA and they got their contribution limit, based on how it was printed. But they didn't understand about these contributions being out of date, and they contributed what it said they could contribute. And then lo and behold, Mr. CRA Taxman comes along 6-8 months later and gives them a nice big penalty. And they're like blown away, flabbergasted. How can I have a penalty? It says right here what my limit is. But CRA can always default back to, well, it's your responsibility to make sure those limits are right and previous contribution room. So solicit the help of your registered financial planner, going through saving contributions. But that's part of what planning is, Dave, right? We've talked about this. It's getting someone to help keep you organized. Financial planning, and I know with us with our Omni formula, it's not just about, financial planning is not buying RSPs or buying investments at all. It's actually putting a plan together and educating the client about what they have, TFSAs being one of them, and helping the client understand what's there and educating the client on how to keep track of their money, instead of just as I said, instead of just buying a product, there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah.
So don't over contribute, because you can't say the government said it was allowed, because that just doesn't fly. It's not good enough.
Before we wrap this up, we do like to open this whole forum up to questions to
Sure
whether
thing.
you're a client or just a viewer or listener, whatever the case is. We've got time for a couple that I do want to throw by you. This one is from
Okay.
Anne, who wants to know about the market that has just gone completely crazy. As an investor, how do you deal with this? I mean, how do you not hit the panic button?
Well, remember what we've always said, Dave, and we talked about this in sports. We've talked about, around years together on radio, and we talk about this since we've been doing this stuff together, is don't let
Yeah.
emotion guide your decision, especially when it comes to money. You'll always make the wrong decision. That's easier said than done, I know, when it's your money. Here's another thing, and I love, I'm a stats freak a little bit, so we'll throw some stats at you here, but I talked about this one in an episode, not a podcast episode, but a radio episode and TV episode a few weeks ago, is about trying to time the market. Don't try and time the market, because here's a real stat. Okay, we got 300. Here's math, Dave, your favorite. We have 365
Yep.
days in a year. Think of how many days there are over 20 years, like 7,770 days. There's a lot of days in 20 years.
Yeah.
If you try and time the market over a 20-year period and you miss the 10 best growth days because you think the bottom hasn't happened yet, you will lose in over a 20-year period 40% of your growth versus just staying in the market. You would have been 40% higher. Now, let's deal with what's going on in the world today and people, just the nervousness about the volatility. Well, perception is not always reality, Dave. Is there a lot of volatility? So let's give you a couple true stories here from the last 2 months. So first off, when I was doing some of the shows I do, the hosts come on and say, oh my gosh, the market's gone crazy with Russia invading Ukraine, and this has caused volatility in the market. No, volatility started to happen at the beginning of January. Volatility was there for 6 or 7 weeks before Ukraine invaded. Here's the interesting thing. I had a phone call mid-morning after Russia invaded. And that morning, the market, the Dow Jones in the States, was down over 790 points, somewhere around there. The guy phoned me, my accounts are going to be in the toilet, blah, blah, blah. And he went on and on and on and on. I look over, I click on my computer. It was near the end of the day. The market that day ended up 95 points. It was actually up, but you wouldn't know that from watching any TV or anything. Here's another one. The very next day, the Dow Jones was up 895 points. So let's just do something. I mean, I know where people are going to review this later, and I don't know what's going to happen later. And so I'm going to bring something up on my computer. And I'm going to go, okay, so the TSX, everyone's going on about how the TSX is, oh my gosh, like we just said from Ann there, and worried about everything. So the best day on the TSX, Toronto Stock Exchange, the Toronto Stock Exchange 300 Composite Index, the best day was, it was at 21,768 on November 12th, 2021. So 21.7. It's now, through all this constant downturn and turbulence and going in the toilet, the TSX is now at 21,400. That's not, do the math, that's not that big of a decline, is it, Dave? 300 points.
Not at all.
On a $21,000 market. So 2,100 points would be 10% down. It's down 300, just under, or 307 when we were recording this. So that's not that much. So develop a plan. Don't try and pick the worst day. And the interesting thing is, and maybe some of the stuff I'm saying is eventually rubbing off on people, or they're learning, and whatever the case may be. I don't know. I just hope they are, because I can tell you this: when Russia invaded Ukraine, and it's a horrible thing, that's going on, and I can't even watch it anymore because it's just kind of sickening. And with a last name like Cishecki, where do you think my family's from? Ancestral, anyways, from the Ukraine, from just outside of Kiev, or Kyiv now. But so it is heartbreaking. but we still have to live. You still have to plan your life. And I had more phone calls, way more phone calls over those few days of people going, I've got extra money. I want to invest. I really want to invest now. And so they're learning it. It's take the emotion out of it and go, I don't know when the bottom day is, but they're figuring the market's a lot less right now than it was before. And it's volatile, but that's where portfolio managers come into play, them picking what's the right thing. Because if the market goes down 10%, that doesn't necessarily mean, not even close, that your portfolio is going to drop 10% if it's managed properly. Yeah. Nothing could be further from the truth, really. And I saw that in 08. I saw that and many other times in 32 years. And I mean, we saw that in 2020 with a 36% decline when COVID hit over a very short period of time. But portfolio managers who made changes at the bottom of that market did a lot of good things for their clients. So, Anne, thanks for the question. The concern is valid. It's real. But develop a plan and know what's going on, and you will sleep at night a lot better. Your eyes will open and you won't be as worried.
This is from Steve. He wants to know, what about RESPs?
Well, RESPs generally should be invested like everything else as part of your portfolio. Look at an RESP as retirement. As you get within a few years of your child needing that RESP for school, look at that like an RRSP, where you may tend to be more conservative, or you may want less volatility as you get closer to the time you need that money. So the analogy is a retired person will probably go with less volatility when they get close to those retirement years, maybe versus what they'll do in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So your kid's RESP may be more conservative or more aggressive when they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old than they will be when they're 15, 16, 17 years old. But same volatility as goes on a lot of times with the rest of the market, because you're still invested in the market. But you just have to, not time the market and guess on when's a good time to put in. In relation to RESPs and TFSAs, the unfortunate, say you're maximized on the RESP and you can't put more money in, because the person could be asking that question too. You can't do anything outside of the RESP in a form of a TFSA till your child is 18, unless you did it under your own name and kind of just tracked it. And then you have to look at something called an in-trust for account, which you can do in your name, children as the annuitant when they're under 18. So there's other vehicles you can invest in other than an RESP, and you'll definitely have to talk to your registered financial planner to see what's the best one for you. And maybe, Dave, you just don't want to tie up all that money hoping or banking on the fact that your child's going to go to post-secondary education, and maybe they won't, so you want to leave more flexibility in your plan.
The best part of it is I'm not going to start singing, Aretha Franklin and RRSP. No, I'm not going there. So no, you're safe. You'll be able to sleep
everyone
tonight.
Thanks you for that.
Yes, exactly. Too flat, Pratt. I've earned it. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, come on. Yes. Let's get back to the old days of what was it called? What was the band again? The
Electric
Lunch Orchestra. The Electric Lunch Orchestra. Come on, Dave. Let's get some guests on here in a future episode.
Sure.
And bring the band back. That would be cool.
No.
Isn't that one of those guys running a winery now?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't drink wine. Me and you are the two. It's hard to believe me and you are the two non-drinkers when we do some of the things we do, because people probably people watch some of these things and figure we're a few cocktails in, but we're not.
No,
we leave that to our wives. But we're the ones who drive them to the winery for the tasting. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
which is what I did last night. Okay.
People, yes, I know. People, when we go out together as couples, hard to believe, but theoretically, Dave and I are the voice of reason. I know. Yes. Hard to imagine.
As always, Peter, great stuff.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Much appreciated. We have 3 more of these to go before the season's up.
Yes. Tick tock.
Yeah.
In the meantime, here's what you do, because you do it the best. Keep raising that level of financial literacy. And if people have got questions, not about the two flat Pratt stuff. No. Real questions here. What can they do? Tell them what they can do.
Go to everythingfinancial.com. Go to yourmoney@everythingfinancial.com. Click on our YouTube channel at Everything Financial Group. Any one of those ways. Send us your questions, comments, queries, insults. We get some of those sometimes too. But reach out because we're happy to answer questions. You do not have to be a client to get a question answered. We're there really, and this is why we started this, Dave. You know that, to educate people. Yeah, we get clients from it. Yeah, we want more. We want clients, absolutely. But I believe there's not enough education in the world when it comes to finances. So I'm happy just to put the things out there and get the people looking after it. Because as we always say, it's your money, and there's nothing wrong with making yourself a little more informed.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter, as always. That's episode 15. We'll be back soon with episode 16. And thanks for sharing on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. And if you've got a question for Peter, you can get us at yourmoney@everythingfinancial.com. Thanks again, Peter.